quiet. Son, we left. Breakfast is on the table. Yes. The jingle of keys and the sound of a door being locked. I looked at the clock and realized that I could take a little nap because it was only 8 in the morning. Since it's summer, I have a lot of time and there's nowhere to rush, so I couldn't think of a better idea than to go back to sleep. Having slowly woken up around 10 o'clock, I realized that today the house was at my disposal until late in the evening, since my parents worked late. After washing up and having breakfast, I began to think about what to do with myself, and I couldn't find anything better than to while away a couple of hours surfing the internet. As always, those couple hours turned into 4 hours of wasted time. Deciding to make up for this time somehow, I went to get some fresh air. The weather outside was great, but for some reason it didn't make me happy. But she didn't make me happy because there wasn't a single person around. No, of course I'm not against it, but there wasn't a single sound that could have been made by a person or vehicle. No, I'm certainly not a timid person, but I think anyone in my place would get cold feet. Therefore, I was about to return home, when suddenly, having walked a few more meters and turned the corner, I saw a picture that somehow reminded me of footage from some movie about the end of the world. Namely, a semblance of a traffic jam consisting of a bunch of cars chaotically located on road, as if all the drivers at the same time stopped controlling them and let them roll on their own. I didn't expect to find anyone in the cars, but I did anyway. There were people in all the cars, but they were sleeping. Absolutely all the people in this traffic jam were sleeping peacefully. But I was also scared by the fact that I couldn't wake them up no matter how hard I tried. And I tried. Whatever I did to somehow awaken the poor fellow from sleep, it was all in vain. Seriously frightened by this turn of events, I rushed home. The first thing, as you all probably already guessed, I started calling. I called everyone indiscriminately, but no one picked up. After thinking a little, I finally decided to look into the neighboring houses to make sure that not only the drivers of the cars were sleeping, but also all the other people. And having been there, I realized that I was right, even though I believed, like a fool, that this was not real and that I was still dreaming. After living like this for a couple of days, I realized that my food supplies were running out and that it was time to get new ones. I came to the conclusion that I had no choice but to rob the nearest store, so I went there. I had already gotten a little used to sleeping people, so it wasn't so scary to see that the whole city, and possibly the world, was mired in sleep. Meanwhile, approaching the display case with a stone in my hands, there had been no light for a couple of days, so the sliding doors, alas, would not open for me. I boldly threw the stone at the glass. Having once again made sure that no one would bother me, I climbed into the store and slowly began to collect the necessary products into a pre-prepared backpack. Carried away by collecting supplies, I forgot to look around, but I should have. Finally turning around in the opposite direction, I immediately regretted my action. It somehow strangely hobbled past this shop. I almost screamed with joy, thinking that I had finally found a normal person. Yes, I was happy until I looked at him more closely and realized that it was better for me not to scream. And in general, it was better not to move, so as not to attract his attention. Because this man had claws instead of fingers, and I was sure that he doesn't need them for beauty. Slowly, I began to back away to the cash register, which stood in the far corner of the building, hoping to sit there until it left. But all my plans collapsed at once when I caught a bottle on the display window with my elbow, which made a loud ringing sound, upon hearing which the monster turned around and ran in my direction. And this is where I got REALLY scared. I ran as fast as I could, but it kept up with me. Then I decided to run through the yards in the hope of confusing him. And after a few minutes I succeeded, although with great difficulty. Returning home, I tried to walk as quietly as possible, since my path lay through the same traffic jam, which is described below. And I suspected that this very monster had once been a person and woke up because of a broken window. So it was noisy now, it's impossible, and you'll have to think about how to get food more silently. Meanwhile, I met my friend again, who clearly doesn't want a hug. Fortunately, he didn't notice me, but he scratched one of the cars with his claw. And what happened was what I was most afraid of when I walked here. The alarm squealed, first at one car, then at the second, third, etc. From that moment on, I realized that my carefree, lonely life would soon be disrupted, and that new neighbors were waiting for me, who, I was sure, would really want to feast on fresh meat. So it's better if they do it now. And I kept coming closer and closer to this creature. I saw how people in cars were changing, and some were already moving, sensing me. I look straight at him and see in his dull eyes a reflection of perhaps the last person on earth. Story 2. Yard Game. My younger sister and I were lucky enough to experience that happy time in childhood, when there were no computers yet, and the child had to look for all the fun outside the walls of the apartment. Vika and other girls her age often played with dolls, a store, and a hairdresser in the yard. At that time, I, together with my comrades, climbed garages and trees, explored attics and basements on my street, burned diesel fuel on the pier, and lined the rails of the nearest railway with stones. I was a brave and reckless boy. I would hardly exaggerate if I say that there were moments when I was on the verge of death. Fortunately, there are some forces in our world that protect children. I have been convinced of this more than once in the future. Summer was the best time of the year. Our yard company was already quite large, and in their free time from school, almost the same number of children came here to visit their relatives, and it became more fun than ever. We stopped dividing into groups of girls and boys. The whole camp went to the beach, ran to the grocery store for milkshakes, and played all kinds of games. During the day, we most often hid from the sun in the entrance or courtyard gazebo, whiling away the time playing Monopoly or cards. When the heat subsided, they began to play Cossack robbers and zombies. The last game was tag, which we improved, when the driver first caught one person, then together they started hunting for others, and so on, until eventually only one alive remained. In the next round, he got a piece of chalk, with which he drew lines on the asphalt, each of which the zombies could not step over for 10 seconds. It was a particular pleasure to quickly make several parallel lines, thereby forcing the pursuers not to waste time on calculations, but to run around. But the best time awaited us every evening when the sun set, and we started playing hide and seek. Our yard, shrouded in darkness, was the perfect place for this fun. On one side, the conditional play area was fenced off by our 5-story L-shaped house, which provided the courtyard with the only lighting in the form of light bulbs above the entrance doors. On the other side, there was an abandoned kindergarten surrounded by a wrought iron fence, which at that time was empty and awaiting the relocation of the district court. Near the former kindergarten, there was a hillock, abundantly overgrown with trees and bushes. In the yard itself, one could find front gardens with a flora slightly less rich than on the hill, a children's playground with a gazebo, pillars with ropes where someone's laundry invariably dried, 3 rusty garages, between which gaped 2 tempting but well-known gaps, a deep exterior basement entrance, a couple of tall boulders, and more. In short, there were plenty of hiding places, and new ones were constantly being found. I was 9 years old then. Vika was 5. One late July evening, our friendly company traditionally had fun playing hide and seek. The next driver, burying his face in the wall of the house, began the countdown, and the rest of the players, laughing and anticipating a first-class stealth action, scattered in the darkness. It occurred to me to hide under a car parked in the roadway of the yard. Lying on the heated asphalt, a little later I heard several victorious ho-ho for myself, and how the driver, in turn, screwed up a couple of players. Then Vika's cry was suddenly heard in the distance. When I heard him, I thought that Vika had either been hurt, or that she had fallen, hit herself, or something like that. In any case, we had to go find out what had happened. I got out from under the car, walked up to the house and called out to my sister. The driver unceremoniously screwed me over and, together with the other guys waiting for the end of the round, told me that they saw Vika run home crying. I followed her, although I knew that I could get a lot of trouble from my parents for not following. When I opened the apartment door, my worried mother came out to me and began asking me what had happened on the street. I honestly answered her that I don't know. We played hide and seek with the whole yard. My sister and I hid in different places. Then I heard her cry, and so on. Vika sat in the kitchen and, sobbing, drank milk. Having calmed down, she at first refused to answer my mother's and my questions, then only said, I was scared. We couldn't get anything more out of her. Frankly, I didn't attach any importance to Vika's words, because as a child she was afraid of everything in the world. Illustrations of insects in a children's encyclopedia, an advertisement for Fizzy Salaska, a red face drawn by someone on a neighboring house, a toy monkey given to her by her mother, and a bunch of others of things. I decided that my sister was frightened by another stupid thing like this. Well, sit at home, I have less to worry about, I thought. It was generally surprising that Vika played hide and seek, Cossack robbers, and other outdoor games with us. She hid poorly, ran slowly, was never forced to lead her, and was caught only as a last resort. She didn't even rule a single game I didn't really know. Maybe she participated just to join the company. I went on to play and, I must say, had a great time then. More than once I found a little hole I had previously found under the car, which, fortunately, no one noticed. Useful. I also often hid in the bushes on the slope of the aforementioned hillock. One day, Sashka Matveev, a boy who came here in the summer to visit his grandparents, quietly came down to me from above and said that he had found an amazing little hole behind a hillock, apparently near the fence of an abandoned kindergarten. I was about to climb upstairs with him to personally see the much-praised find, but then I noticed that the girl who was driving was heading downstairs to look at the playground, and I thought that this moment was worth using. Therefore, I left Sashka and rushed to save myself from the fate of the driver in the next round, and then somehow forgot about the secret he had told me, since even without it, there was something to diversify the game. For example, I came up with the idea of hiding in the shade of trees and being invisible to people in the light, calmly standing there and watching other people's movements. And my neighbor in the entrance, Dimka Litkin, who had taken a Soviet metal flashlight out of the house, turned it on in one of the rounds and ran away, placing it on the ground behind massive boulders, then returned and asked everyone to hide in the same place in the opposite part of the yard. The result fully met his expectations. The driver, noticing the light of the flashlight, walked with a firm step towards the boulders, and before he had time to reach them, more than 20 people collectively ran up to the wall of the house and each shouted, "Hole, hole," for himself, thereby forcing the unfortunate man to drive again. Now, of course, I understand that it was simply deception for the sake of deception, but then we sincerely considered Dimka a tactical genius. In general, that time we had a lot of fun and played until late, until most of us were driven home by the adults. I have a very good memory for pleasant life moments, even if they are long past. This was 13 years ago. My sister graduated from school this year, and in a year I will graduate from university. The other day, Vika deftly caught a spider crawling across the kitchen table and threw it out the window. I noted that she was once deathly afraid of even painted spiders, not to mention real ones, and we started talking, remembering all the nonsense that scared her as a child. The conversation, as you understand, reached the incident described above, after which my sister completely stopped playing with us. Hearing my question about that ill-fated day, Vika laughed and willingly shared her old secret. But when she started talking, I didn't feel like laughing. Goosebumps ran across my skin. Vika said that for once she was well hidden, namely, also in the bushes on the slope of a hill. And after some time, Sashka Matveev came down from above on all fours in the same way. Sitting down next to her, he said that he had found a beautiful doll behind the hill that he would like to give to her. Our parents strictly forbade us to take anything from strangers, so Vika replied that she didn't need anything. Sashka began to persistently persuade her to go upstairs, almost grabbing her by the hand. Vika got angry and told him to back off. Hearing this, Matveev, according to her, made a terrible, annoyed and hostile grimace and suddenly began to frantically eat the grass, literally tearing it out with clods of earth and stuffing it into his mouth. My sister, of course, was frightened by his behavior. She began to cry and asked Sashka to leave. And he surprisingly left, or rather, he somehow backed away in a peculiar way and, without taking his angry gaze off Vika, disappeared onto the dark hillock from where he had appeared. Why did Vika's story scare me after so many years? Matveev may have been a strange guy, I can't say for sure, since I had very little contact with him at the time. But it was not he who visited my sister and me that evening, inviting us under various pretexts to go and look at something in the pitch darkness behind the hill. Because I remember with absolute 100% accuracy that it was Sashka who gashed me near the house when I got out from under the car and went to figure out why Vika was crying. And whatever it was that was crawling up from above, I almost followed it if it weren't for my impetuous decision to run to the house.